it doesn't even feel like a choice. It just feels like that is the only way. I get it, you don't know it until you've been there, but almost like putting the blinders on and choosing not to have empathy for somebody who is truly struggling with something, because it really is a struggle. It really is a fight to want to live every day.
Hey there, my name is Sean, and this is Suicide Noted. On this podcast, I talk with suicide attempt survivors so that we can hear their stories. Every year around the world, millions of people try to take their own lives, and we almost never talk about it. And when we do talk about it, many of us, including me, aren't very good at it. So, one of my goals with this podcast is to have more conversations and hopefully better conversations with attempt survivors. If you are a suicide attempt survivor and you'd like to talk, please reach out. Hello at suicidenoted.com or on Facebook or Twitter at Suicide Noted. I want to thank all of the attempt survivors who have joined me here on the podcast since we launched in July of 2020, and of course, to everybody who listens. Thank you so much. An invitation to all of our listeners. Every month or two, I have an open mic called the Mental Health Happy-ish Hour. It's through my other organization called Grit True Stories That Matter, where we help people tell their stories, and we produce events and all sorts of other cool things. If you've got a story that usually under 10 minutes or so, you want to come and tell it, it's a great space. It's a supportive space and a safe space. Would love to have you there. Or maybe you just want to hear some stories. Join us this Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. If this Sunday doesn't work out, there will be others. I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, as far as Suicide Noted, we are talking about suicide, so this may not be a good fit for everybody. Please take that into account before you listen. But I do hope you listen, because there is so much to learn. Today, I am talking with Ryan. Ryan lives in Maine, and he is a suicide attempt survivor.
Where do you live, Ryan?
I live here in Maine, Bangor, Maine.
I don't know if I've spoken to anybody for this podcast who resides in Maine.
No, yeah. Well, I feel lucky.
Appreciate you making the time to talk with me.
Yeah, no worries at all. No worries at all.
We're talking about suicide. This is not a subject most people want to talk about.
No.
So that begs the question, at least from my perspective, why do you want to talk about this stuff openly?
I think for me, it's mainly because when I'm in those spirals and things like that, you know, when people hear suicide, they're like, ugh, you know, it's hard to the ears. And it is. It is hard to the ears. And I feel like that's part of the reason why a lot of people talk about it. And, you know, just as you just said, you know, not a lot of people talk openly about it. So it really is this taboo kind of, you know, you really don't talk about that, you know, it's behind closed doors kind of thing. You know, yes, it is private, but at the same time, really is detrimental to not talk about it, because then people are suffering in silence, and that just adds on to it.
For sure. Because I do wonder who hears this, if it makes a difference. And I'm sure it does. People sometimes reach out and they'll tell me. Sometimes I think we're like in this little sort of echo chamber, right? Like everybody who needs to hear it, the people, like, they're already listening. They already get it. The people that you want to get it are probably maybe never going to get it, but we try, I guess.
Right, exactly. And I think that's part of it too, is, again, to not make it so taboo, is because everybody deals with depression. Everybody deals with things, you know, that they've gone through in life in different ways. And I feel like not everything has to be so secretive and quiet. And because at the end of the day, a lot of people have dealt with, you know, depression and anxiety and, you know, suicidality and things like that. And it's just I mean, if everybody really talked about it, you know, a lot of people would probably be surprised as to the amount of people who have struggled with it. So it's just actually opening your mind up to saying, okay, you know, I'm not the only person in the world who's dealing with this, because the majority of the world has. And I feel like that's something that we almost choose to ignore.
Yeah. And on this particular afternoon in January of 2022, I'm curious about Ryan's experience with suicide or attempts, ideation. Where do you want that story or that part to begin?
So I really had dealt with suicidality very early on. You know, my parents got divorced at the age of 6. I mean, they're coming around now, but they weren't the best parents, just for the fact of they didn't keep anything. If they had something to say to each other, they just said it, you know, at full volume in front of us, kind of thing. So it really wasn't the most emotionally stable childhood. And I remember writing my first, you know, I didn't even think of it as a suicide note then, but I just remember writing my first note. It was at the age of 8 or 9. I was in the car because one thing that I did a lot that my parents just never understood and still really don't is I used to cry a lot. I mean, they were panic attacks. That's what they were. But I used to have these panic attacks all throughout my childhood. I would just cry randomly, and I would just have panic attacks. And they always just, never necessarily, I mean, which they didn't know what it was. I understand, but they just kind of never really talked about it, never really asked about it, brought it up, hey, what's going on? I was in the car and we were heading home. It was actually winter as well. And I just started crying, and there was a notebook in the mat pocket because I was in the back seat. I just took it out and I just started writing. I don't want to do this. I can't exactly remember what I wrote, but it was along the lines of, I hate this, it's just the aspects of being alone. And because I was sort of a middle child as well, so just kind of an isolation factor. Couldn't talk to my parents kind of thing. So just more of, I had nowhere to go. So I remember writing the note and I put it in the back seat. To this day, I don't know if they saw it, but it never got brought up. Don't know if they saw it. I don't know if they just ignored it. No idea.
And does your childhood change at all? Or into your preteen, teen years?
My life really started going downhill at the age of 6. That's what I like to say. So I wrote the note at the age of around 8. Probably the next big event that had happened was I was molested by an uncle. I was 9 or 10. It didn't even register as that. And I remember having nightmares every night till the age of 15 is when I really kind of, with my therapist came to terms with it. But every night I just wake up from these night terrors. Again, the crying and things like that. And just the panic. It's not even crying. It was just panic. Just feeling like I'm being suffocated all the time kind of thing.
So you're in therapy at 15 and it starts to come out. You start to talk about what happened.
Exactly. Well, actually, let's go back a little bit. So remember in middle school. So this is age 12. I really hadn't talked to anybody about anything. Things were just happening with my family, was more becoming more toxic. It was just a horrible, horrible time. One day, my counselor, the school counselor, just brought me in, and she was like, "What's wrong?" Because I'm labeled as the smiley guy, which I try to be, and she could just tell something was wrong. I just sat in her office, and the moment she closed the door, and that's when I lost it. That's when she didn't even say anything. Everything had been built up for so long. We started talking and things like that, and she was like, "I really am concerned, Ryan, that you have depression, and you have all the symptoms of depression." A few days goes by, she brings my mom in, because my mom was working, so she had to find time to work. She brought my mom in, and she was like, "I'm really concerned that Ryan has depression." Me and my mom really haven't talked about this since. It does bother me still, but she just immediately denied it. She's like, "No, he doesn't have depression. No, nope, that's not it. That's not it. Nope. It just felt so invalidating. It felt so just tell me just to be quiet and just to deal with it. And that comes up, a few times, and I'll talk about that. But it just was very much, nope, that's not it. Sorry, bye, deal with it kind of thing.
I'm asking you to speculate here. What was she doing there? What was going on? Why would she deny that? Do you have any idea?
The only thing that I can really think of, and this isn't defending her, it's just she has dealt with a lot of depression in her life. And I think it was more out of fear. She didn't want me to deal with depression and things like that. I think it was just fear. Because, although she wasn't the best parent, and she'll admit it, she does love me. And so I truly think it came from, she didn't want me to have depression. But in her, not wanting me to, it really kind of steamrolled that into the heavy major depression that I had. I just feel like if she had stopped and listened for once, that probably would have helped. For some reason, we wanted to move down to Florida. Because I was born in Florida, and my mom's side of the family is down there. I hate Florida. Florida is America's used condom, honestly. To afford to move down, because we were renting just an apartment complex in Levant. So we moved out of there into this old camper. It was like a 1977 Dodge camper van. It was moldy. We had to put trash bags, because the overhang where they have the other bed, we had to put trash bags over that because it was all mold. It didn't run. The only thing that worked in there really was the heat. But in 1977, let's just say that, no camper is really made for the winter. That's why they always put them away, because there's no insulation. Now in, Maine winters, they get well below freezing sometimes. And so this was 8th grade. We were homeless from, won't say it's homeless. I say it's homelessness because that was ridiculous. But it was from, I want to say October till we moved in June. Through all of winter, through everything, I remember brushing my teeth and it would freeze on my face. And I would have to go in and because we didn't have hot water either, so I'd have to like warm up my hands so I can actually like wipe the frozen toothpaste off my mouth. That too, I just never. Nobody really knows that. None of my friends. And it was hard. We moved down to Florida, and then after my freshman year, we moved back up. And then that's when I got a therapist. That's when I really started talking about me. And in talking to my therapist, that's when some of the because things that I did in the past, like attempting and the ideas and things like that, I never really labeled them as that. It was just how I felt. I remember it was very hard for me to realize the fact of the suicidality that had started so early on and it was so present. I never really know what to put on it. It was just how I felt. But I remember just like every day, just hating everything, just never wanting to be here. And I remember I would just find ways to either hurt myself because we had these huge wooden staircase because we had a split home ranch style, something like that. So you had the front door and you had the two stairs going down. I remember I would just throw myself down the stairs, just hoping I would hurt myself or something.
Now, do you consider any of those things that you've shared thus far an attempt?
Not really, no. Idolizing it and suicidality, definitely. The closest I had gotten in the early years was I always thought about drinking bleach. It was always in my mind. Every time I did laundry, because I helped out with the chores, whatever. I just would always feel like that's probably a good way. I didn't even know what bleach was, but it smelled horrible. So I was like, that's probably a good way out. I probably stopped around the age of like 10 or 11. But before that, I always was finding, because I didn't even know, I didn't even know life was, let alone to end it. So it was just very much, I remember searching for something else.
Do you make it through high school?
Yeah, I graduated high school. So again, through therapy, I had realized I had an eating disorder. That is one thing that I realized that I had developed. At first started out with bulimia and manifested into anorexia. Those habits really started at the age of, I want to say 10 or 11, probably 11. Once I went into therapy, it was again one of those things, never knew what it was. It was never a concern for any other person in my life, it felt like. So once I finally got into therapy, it was very much of seeing everything that I was doing to myself. It was very eye-opening. Therapy definitely helped to get over that. And I'm over that now. It's something that, I'll always deal with the mindset, kind of thing, but day to day. Put in the category of self-harm. Definitely, I put the, eating disorder and self-harm. I cut for a little bit, but it really wasn't for me kind of things. I hate pain. But it was very much very low levels of self-harm in the beginning. And I think it was mostly because of the lack of knowledge of what self-harm actually was. So I feel like if I really did know what, the extreme measures of self-harm was, I probably would have done it.
Interesting childhood.
Very, very.
And this is mostly in Maine and a little bit in Florida.
Exactly, yeah. I was born in Florida. We moved up when I was 3. And then we moved back down again at the end of 8th grade, so my freshman year of high school, and we moved back up, and I've been here ever since.
When is your first attempt?
The closest I had ever got was my senior year of high school. There had been a lot of things that had gone on. I had 2 uncles pass away from suicide in the same year. And then my sophomore year, that's when, again, the eating disorder really got into play. Junior is when I had a friend pass away by suicide, and we were quite close. His name was Cody. His death really, really affected me.
Did you have any idea?
No, I wasn't necessarily his best friend. I'm not going to sit here and act like I was. But small town in Maine kind of thing. His aunt was was the cafeteria lady at my middle school and elementary school. I worked with his aunt. I knew his family. He had a fairly big family. I knew his whole family kind of thing. So I went to elementary school, middle school with him. In high school is when we really started to become very good friends. We had classes together, and this thing that we did was we gave each other pieces of gum. So every day we gave each other pieces of gum, just how we complimented each other. We saw each other every day. And I remember the day that he passed away. He was a very, very tall person. I'm vertically challenged. I'm 5'6". They say I'm 5'5". I say I'm 5'6". But I was 5'2" back then, and he was probably 6'2" kind of thing. So he was very, very tall, very commanding. And we were in the hallway, and I passed him, and he just gave me a whole, in a wrapper and everything, a whole new pack of gum. And he was like, "Hey, I just want you to have this pack of gum." And I was like, "Well, thank you, Cody. I appreciate it. I can give you a piece of gum, something in return or something." And he was just like, no, I just want you to know you're awesome. I just want you to have the piece of gum. And before I could say anything else, he just walked away. And then, the day went on. Didn't really think too much of it. I was like, he was a really good friend. At the end of the day, I had to pass his car to go to my parking spot. And so I'm passing and I'm a little bit behind him, trailing behind him. And he's, his head is down and he's just walking to he had a green Trailblazer. He was walking to his car, his truck. Exiting my high school, there's 2 lanes. One to go right, one to go left. And I was going to work into town, so I go left. Right goes into Carmel, and he lives in Carmel. So he was going right, I was going to work, I was going left. I'm sitting there because it's Route 2 is fairly busy and there's a bunch of traffic. He gets right next to me. I wave, hey Cody, and just stares at me. Doesn't do anything. There's no traffic going. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there and it was like a little weird. And he went off and I went on my way. And later that night, it was like 9 o'clock that night, he passed away. That was definitely that just broke me. I don't know. I think it just hit, like, the uncles that had passed away by suicide. I didn't know them quite too well. I know, I never met one of them. My mom's uncle, I never met. And then my dad's uncle, or sorry, that was my mom's brother, but my dad's uncle, he was technically great uncle, I guess. But I think when Cody passed away, I think that was the first time that really had set in suicide. I remember I came home the next day and I was crying and crying and crying. And my mom got home from work and she heard that I was crying and she came in and I told her what happened. And she was silent. She gave me my time to cry and she essentially said, I can't exactly remember what she said because, hysterical, but she essentially said, I'll give you 2 weeks to essentially get over it and then I'll be worried. And that's something, again, I haven't really talked to her about. It's, I don't know if she meant that as in, I'll be worried about, I'm worrying about you. But it really came off as, in either way, that wasn't necessarily the thing that I needed to hear in the first place anyway.
Right. Why is there a time limit we give people? Why is there this tough love? Where is that? Where's that born? Why?
There is no timeline in grief, period. Like, the thing that, my philosophy is you don't ever move on, and that's the thing that, there's more death, that I'll go over too. But I've heard, oh, you'll get over it, you'll get past it. It's like, you never get past it. And telling somebody you'll get past it, you'll get over it means you're saying I'm just gonna one day I'm not gonna think about this person every day. You're telling me one day their life will have no meaning. And that's what it feels like. And it's, you never move past it. You move forward with the grief. You don't get over it. You don't get past it. You move forward with the grief. You move on with the grief, and because you are going to deal with it for the rest of your life. And it's just so demeaning to have somebody say, but to put a timestamp on it.
Even if they're trying to come from like a good place, they care. It's bizarre. I don't get it. I'm sure that they might be able to come up with a reason why it makes sense to them.
And that's the other thing too, is like, people are like, oh, everything happens for a reason, which I think that's bullshit. Everything doesn't happen for a reason. I don't necessarily believe in a God or anything like that, but it's just like, life is unfair. Life sucks. Especially now the world's burning. I think we all know that, but it's just, life sucks and life is unfair. And I don't think there is any reason for anybody to be suffering in this world.
What happens with you? When's your first actual attempt?
So it was my senior year. It was English class, my last period of that day. And a friend that I brought home a lot, he was actually a really good friend of mine. I considered him my best friend. And sometimes he needed a ride, sometimes he didn't. The whole day, I just wasn't feeling right, just wasn't feeling it. Just really wasn't. And I don't even remember talking to one, or like talking at all during the day. I don't even think I talked once during that day. I don't know, I was just very complacent with being numb and feeling numb. And I felt like the ultimate numbness was to not be here. Because at times, numbness felt very stabilizing. If you numb yourself from feelings don't always hurt. And I feel like that's really where it started, was I became complacent with the numbness. So English period got over and I just was like, it felt like the right thing to do. It felt like there was no other right answer. It just felt right. It just felt like, not even right, because it's definitely something that still upsets me thinking about it, but it just felt like that was the answer. It felt like that. It felt okay, I should say. And so I'm walking out of the classroom. He calls my name and he was like, hey, Ryan, you want to give me a ride home? And I was like, I wanted to say no because I knew it was what I was going to do. I was like, but he was like, no, I really, really need to get home to let the dogs out. My dad's not picking me up. I was like, okay, just make it quick. I'm not really feeling it today. I get in my car and I'm just driving, and it's about 3 or 4, maybe 5 miles from the school. I'm not talking at all, just kind of blank. He's like, hey, what's going on? And I was like, nothing, just want to go home. Because at the time I drove a manual, and I just remember the rest of my body just being a smooth operating machine, and just in my head, I was just like obsessing over wanting to get home to end my life. the more time went on, it was like I was obsessing over it. The way I wanted to do it was I really am mad at myself sometimes for, thinking of that. But I was going to take my great grandfather's shotgun. And so I just remember just obsessing over that. I just wanted to go home now. So he's trying to talk to me and things like that. So he was like, something's wrong. Let's talk to me. Something's obviously bothering you. What's going on? And I tell him, I was like, I just don't want to be here. He was like, well, what do you mean? I was like, I paused for a good minute. I told him, I was like, if I'm going to be completely honest, I told him, I was like, I just really honestly want to commit suicide. I feel like there's no other answer. And I said it blank like that. And he just was silent. He just was brought back. And I think that's also why I was silent, because I just was upset that I wasn't home. And I was telling him, I was like, I just want to get you home so I can just go home and just end it. That's when I could tell his anxiety was kind of building. I haven't apologized to him. I really should, because that was a lot to unload. I could see his anxiety just building and just like almost freaking out almost, and like in the passenger seat of the car. So we get home or to his house. He was like, well, why don't you just come in? Just come in and let's just take a breather. Let's talk. Let's, whatever. Play with the dog, something. I get there and we get to his room and I'm just like, just really don't want to be here. And that's all I could say. There was no other thing to say. And I kept wanting to leave. I just kept inching, through my verbiage saying, I really just, okay, it's time to go. Like, I just really want to go home. He just wouldn't, like, physically, if I left, I could have, but he just was like really not letting me leave. Just really just pressing the fact of, no, let's talk about it. What's going on? Tell me what's going on. And so I finally sit down and I just let it all out. I just unload. That's when the grip loosened to the wanting to end my life. Then in that moment, that grip kind of loosened up, and it took me a while to really completely take my hands off of that idea. It was very gripping.
And that's when you were about 17?
Yes, 17. Yeah. To this day, I don't have any guns in this house now, but I never got to touch the gun after that.
And your friend was there for you?
He was, yeah.
Right. Even his response, as you recall and share with me here, like he said, what do you mean? That is not somebody who's freaking out. That is not somebody who is denying, any number of things that we probably don't want someone to do or say. Right. That is somebody holding space, asking for clarification, right, inviting you to have a conversation, or doing nothing and just being there. All the things I think most people want in that kind of situation. And this young kid did it, and he probably had no training in that. He was just doing what he does for his friends.
And he really did. And it just really surprised me how open he was to that subject.
What happens? When's the next one? How old are you?
So actually it was last week.
Hold up. How old are you now?
19.
Oh, you're only 19 years old. I thought you were a little older. So, this is happening a little bit more recently than for some reason I was imagining. Do you live with your parents?
No, I live on my own.
You live on your own in Bangor, Maine?
Yeah.
In college?
I did college and then switched my major, but I just don't know what I want to do. I'm working at the big hospital here. I work in neurosurgery.
All right. So this is what you just shared with your friend, the linebacker friend in your car, and the gun, and how close you came was only, it sounds like it was like just before the COVID.
Exactly.
So last week, you're one of a few people I've spoken to who had a really recent attempt.
And I still am really honestly pissed at myself, because I had, going through therapy and things like that, I had really just I hadn't even had a thought in my mind close to that since my senior year. And I had been doing really good. It really still bothers me that I had come so close.
So you're in therapy. I don't know if this is a question you could even answer, especially because it was rather recent, very recent. What is going on that you go from what you're sharing? Pretty good. Stable, I guess, is a word we could use. Yeah. Working, therapy. What happens? Do you have any idea?
Isolation. Because I have my job. I'm doing good. Like, I'm doing really good.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, and the ups and downs is, I don't really see any of my friends since high school. Haven't really seen any of my friends since high school. Haven't really interacted with many people in this Bangor, Maine. There's really not many things to do around here. Especially as a gay man, there really isn't any guys around to go out on dates or anything like that. It has always bothered me. I like to go on dates. I like to go on little, dinner dates, just because, meet new people. In Bangor, just like there's nobody out there.
No. How big is Bangor?
32,000 people.
So there's not a scene for you to meet people.
No. Especially up here, it isn't always the most welcoming place in the world either.
For
for, the LGBT community or really anything outside of the box kind of thing.
Right. And the box being straight, white, conservative.
And I'm not going to act like, we're in the, 1700s. The world itself really has gone a far away, but not where we need to be, I think, at all. And it sometimes gets to me. Sometimes, well, I'll get to, last week. It just really was a spiral. It just really was a spiral of, just isolation, just not talking to anybody. I mean, I still don't. It doesn't necessarily bother me all, most of the time. People suck. I really don't like people. So I'm completely fine, on my own, truly. But it sometimes gets to me, and it really got to me last week. Just looking through my contact list and looking at people I could call, and just like nobody really came out to me who would be open. Just isolating. And me going through my contact list really kind of is what I think set in the mindset of that, where I was of, okay, there really is nobody, so there's nothing. And I had gone to the ER 3 days before that. I just tried ice skating for the first time, and I ended up pulling a muscle in my shoulder. It was fairly minor, so they gave me some muscle relaxers for that. And I was doing fine then too. I was doing perfectly fine then. And so they gave me a bunch of muscle relaxers. And I had taken them, prescription amount, 2 days. I remember I was just crying that night. I was just crying. I went to the bathroom and I came out and they're on the counter and I just stared at them. Really, I don't even know what really began the mindset of, okay, this is it. But it just was like the switch. I just kind of locked in on them and it just, okay, looks like that's how it's going to be.
And you take them?
I took a dose, like the prescription dose that they told me. And then I had the rest in my hand and I just started, and then I just broke down. Because every time that I have had, suicidality and things like that, it's not, I don't want to die. It's just living sucks.
Right. It's a tough space between the two.
Exactly. Because I really, and that's why that's why I broke down, is just, I don't want to die. But it's just so fucking hard to live.
So what happened that night? Do you recall?
So I did end up calling a friend, and I was just like, hey, I am really, really down deep. And I really need somebody or something, or else I'm going to do something bad.
Mm.
And he was like, okay, I'll be there in 10 minutes. He was there in like 5. He was just like, just get in the truck. And so I did. And we just drove around. And I don't think he really understood the gravity of the situation at first. So I got in the truck. He was like, hey, what's going on? And I just was like, I really am about to end my life. I just don't want to do this every day. He was fairly just taken back. And
yeah,
I kept apologizing. I'm sure it's painful for you to hear, but I just can't suffer in silence anymore. And that's really what it felt like. It just felt like nobody really knows what I deal with, every day. I'm the type of person who, again, it's just, I always have a smile on my face. I'm always happy-go-lucky. And no one really knows the things that I go through, the things that I've dealt with. It's not that they need to know. It just sometimes feels like, I put myself in a corner because I'm this, happy-go-lucky person. I'm always smiling, always have a great attitude. And then the things that I deal with every day, I bring to somebody, a friend or something like that. And they're just like, whoa. This is not the Ryan that I know. This is not like, whoa. And it's like, no, it is. It's just when I'm happy, I'm happy. When I'm not, I'm not. I have run into that a couple of times where it's just like, I'll open myself up and somebody was like, whoa, like that's a lot more than I was expecting, kind of thing. So it sometimes I feel like I put myself in a corner where I feel like I don't have many people to go to because I feel like I can't have that deep conversation with somebody sometimes.
Mm-hmm. How far before or after last week when you had that attempt or near attempt, did you look for this podcast or look for something related to suicide? Was that before?
I mean, this podcast before, yeah. But just suicidality, like, and really death podcast, I had been listening to since junior year.
Podcasts related to that.
Exactly. Because I had gone to like 4 funerals, I think it was in the course of a year. And so it was very much of me wanting to talk about it because I really didn't talk about it. I've been listening to this podcast here for probably 2 months now. Because I would just put in suicide or death or grieving and things like that. And I put in suicide once and I saw this and I was like, oh, pretty cool. Actually hearing people's stories. So a lot of times, the podcast will just talk about it but not necessarily always people's actual experiences.
I could look on the email. I just don't have it in front of me. When did you reach out, after or before last week?
Before.
Yeah. Oh, so you reached out to me. We started exchanging emails. Then last week happened.
Exactly.
For lack of better words, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, me too.
And especially if you want to be here, then I'm yeah, that's good.
And that's the thing that really, still pisses me off is like life is good. Life really is, and I know it's not, material stuff. The position in life has really nothing to do with, suicidality. I mean, unless it's in the negative. It just, I really was upset with myself afterwards, and after thinking about it, things like that, I still am. It's just like I'm doing really, really well, and it just would have sucked if I had gone through with it, because I really, like I said, I don't want to die. I really don't. I truly do love my life. I just bought a brand new car, and I'm doing very good with my job and things like that. So it's just opening my eyes to, I'm not necessarily buying into the toxic positivity,
Oh,
appreciating a little more of life.
kind of car?
It's a 2022 Buick Encore GX.
All right. Did you ever get diagnosed with anything that you think is correct?
Yes.
What is that diagnosis?
Major depression, generalized anxiety disorder.
Do you take medication for that?
Yes.
Do you find it's helpful?
I do.
You're really good at the short answer part when I framed it that way. Wow. Do you think that you will try again?
If this interview was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have said, oh, no. But with the kind of slap in the face that life had handed me, probably, yeah.
Are there people in your life that might hear this and hear what you say in this conversation?
Yes, I have actually told some close friends of mine that I'm going to be on this podcast.
So they'll hear this. So it's interesting how they might react now that, one, they hear a little bit more about your life that maybe you haven't shared. And something like you just said, because hey, I might try again. How are they going to engage with you a little bit differently? Maybe.
And that's the thing I'm honestly open to is nobody knows about my suicide attempts and that I've struggled with that all my life. Nobody knows that. I mean, besides my therapist and, the friend or the friends both times, I've never gone out and told people about it, kind of thing. But I really feel like this is part of me growing into my true self. Because I've been very confident, which again, this is why I love my life, is I'm very confident in myself. This is the first time in my life I've been confident and been fully loving myself. I feel like the only way to truly love myself is to not hide it from the world.
Yeah.
Putting it all out there, kind of thing. And whoever hears it, hears it.
Yeah. And I'm sure there will be people that greatly appreciate that. They need to hear this, really. You may never know them. They may never contact you, but exactly. They're out there, right? That's the power of this sort of platform. Other than meds, what, if anything, helps you feel a little less shitty? If anything?
Therapy and my coping mechanisms.
You want to share them?
Yeah. Maine, I truly do love Maine. Maine is very beautiful. So I'll go out on a drive and listen to a podcast and just enjoy the scenery, enjoy the ride. And that is extremely therapeutic for me. Snowboarding, those activities, those kind of activities really are helpful. So
it sounds like, and of course you'll tell me if I'm wrong here, you don't have a lot of people. This is how most people's lives are. You don't have a lot of people to talk to about these kinds of things.
No.
Yeah. I wonder what the world would be like. I don't know if that's the best way to frame it. People's lives would be like if they had 1 or 2, maybe 3 people who they could really talk to. I really think it would be a very different experience. Life would be different.
Because, everybody says, oh, I'm here for you, this and that. And then you open yourself up and then you get the, whoa, wait, that's.
Once you get that once, twice, a few times, you're not going to go back. You've been told clearly. They've communicated with you very clearly. You know what? This is what I'm cool with, but this is what I'm not cool with. You're not going back. Why would you?
Exactly.
Why'd you reach out and say, yeah, I don't remember your exact words, but it was essentially, if you want to talk, I'd love to talk.
I'm tired of holding what feels like a secret. I'm tired of holding it to myself so tightly because it really does weigh on me. The fact that I just that feels like a secret that I'm holding so tightly. And so I feel like this is just a release for me. Just finally taking a deep breath, not holding anything back and just really letting my story be out there. And so I can actually, because I've never told my story from A to B. Like I've told my therapist, parts of because I've had 3 therapists in my life. I've told therapists about one thing, one therapist has helped me with another, and certain people know certain aspects of my life. But no, I haven't told my story A to B. And I feel like that's something I can also just have out there and just finally get off my chest. Because it feels like, again, just like holding that secret to myself so tight, and it causes a lot of anxiety for me.
Do you ideate every day?
Probably weekly. I would say every day. 'Cause there's some days where I go on and if I'm having such a good day, sometimes I don't even feel any emotion besides, in the moment. Sometimes later in the week, I haven't really talked to anybody. And that's when not even thinking about suicide for me, but just thinking about the people that I've lost and grief and
And the isolation is tough.
exactly.
Yeah.
Given time and space, the mind is a very dangerous neighborhood hang out in.
Mm-hmm. Are there any myths? If you heard the podcast, I tend to ask that question. So have you thought, were there any that you thought of as you thought about talking today?
I've heard a lot from, and this is also probably why I never really told any of my friends. Not that my closest friends have ever said this, but I heard a lot of people in high school say, "Oh, people who commit suicide or complete suicide is how I like to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Are selfish. They deserve it if that's how they want to treat other people in their life." And I feel like that is just so incorrect. It doesn't even feel like a choice. It just feels like that is the only way. I get it, you don't know it until you've been there, but almost like putting the blinders on and choosing not to have empathy for somebody who is truly struggling with something, because it really is a struggle. It really is a fight to want to live every day. I feel like the myth of, well, people who do are just selfish, they're assholes, they're horrible. I've heard people who have gone through it, whether it be a husband or family members of people that I've lost, things like that. And I've heard, again, it wasn't to me, but there was, oh my God, that's so horrible. Or, oh, I can't believe they did that. That kind of thing, did that to you, that kind of thing. I think people who complete suicide are actively trying to hurt other people. That's just not how it is.
Yeah. Do you have that note, by the way, the one that you wrote when you were 8 years old? Is that gone?
I think I left it in there for a reason. I wanted to see if they would find it. It stayed in there until they traded it in.
Ooh.
2016.
Someone probably found it out there somewhere and they're reading this note like, what the fuck?
I've stayed up at night some nights wondering where the hell that note is. There's one day where I was like, well, it's got to be in there. I got to find it. But I should have. But I was like, no, I'm just gonna leave it. I'm just gonna leave it. I'm not gonna go look for it. Because there's one day I was like, okay, I have to. Because it wasn't a dirty car, but especially the mat pockets, they didn't clean it. There's stuff in there from when I was 8 or whatever. And so it was just like, no, I'm not gonna go look for it. It's done. Who cares? Whatever. And it was in there when they traded the car on.
Did you ever get any answers? And I don't know if that's the right word, about your friend who ended his life. Was there a note? Was there anything for you to sort of attach yourself to?
So there wasn't a note for Cody. I did have another friend that passed away by suicide my senior year. He posted a note on his Snapchat. He posted his suicide note on the Snapchat story.
On Snapchat, which disappears.
That was very hard. His name is Chris. He posted it on his story. And I got a call from a friend and he was like, hey, have you seen Chris's Snapchat story? I was like, no, I'm living. I'm not necessarily on Snapchat all the time. So he was like, I just need you to check it. And I checked it and it just, my heart dropped. Yeah, he ended up passing away.
So you had said that it's not selfish and they're not assholes. They're not trying to hurt people. And that's how you feel about Chris and Cody, that they were not those things.
Exactly. Because I've been there. It's not, when I've gotten closer or thought about it hours on it, and it's not out of malice. It's not, oh, I'm doing this to hurt XYZ kind of thing. It's something that I'm struggling with myself. And, not to be rude, but it's just very telling when people say, oh, they're selfish, but they're the main people who hadn't checked on them. And I'm not going to lie, I can't necessarily speak for everybody who's dealt, because everybody deals with it in different ways and goes about it and has different thoughts and takes on it. But I chose not to tell anybody. I didn't want to tell anybody, kind of thing. So I definitely did keep it secret for a while.
I admittedly am judgmental towards people who say those things, and I don't want to label them, but to be really frank, I kind of think they're selfish. I don't want to spit it back at them, but I'm like, and I also wonder if they knew. Were you there for them?
Exactly.
Did you try to help them out? Were you there? Did you listen? Did you hold space? Then maybe you wouldn't have said that. Oh, you're just sort of commenting and you weren't there for them. I don't know. I mean, it's case by case, right?
It is case by case. And every time I've heard that, it just angers me so much. It's just so dehumanizing to say that about somebody who has passed away like that.
You don't know what they're going through. That's the real thing. You just
exactly. You can't just put what they're going through in a box and throw it away.
While we'll never know, we can't ever know this. Pretty sure people usually want to stay alive.
Exactly.
So if they are doing something that puts that in peril, they're going through something that, even if it sounds similar to what you've gone through on paper, it's probably not. This is a serious decision. This is no joke. I get that people don't know what to do with it. I do. You don't know what to do with it. I lost my friend years ago, but my best friend, you don't know what to do with it. And I guess people just want to do it. We try to find meaning and we try to find the words, understandably, but questionable words often. Let's say that. Yeah. What else would you like to share, Mr. Ryan in Bangor, Maine, with the Buick?
That it's okay to feel like you're feeling. That's one thing that really didn't help as well, is I felt like I was indifferent and I just was bad to think the way that I do or to feel the way that I do. And I feel like that also kind of adds into some of the isolation, is just to know that I'm pretty sure everybody on this planet has dealt with depression, anxiety, all in different ways, all in completely different ways. And that's to be respected. But to know that just because you see somebody who seems stable doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going through something. So just like choosing to look into somebody, choosing to really not just see what they're putting out on the outside and really trying to dig and see what's underneath, because a lot of times there's something you wouldn't expect or something they're willing to share.
And then I guess a whole other conversation is when they do open up to you, then what do you do? And we know, but that's a whole other, baby steps, I guess, right? Starting point.
Exactly.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you reaching out and talking with me and being open and honest, and especially given that this has been sounds like a rough month.
Yeah.
Life is good sometimes.
Exactly. Not always.
Not always. I do hope that we get the fuck through this whole COVID shit and that your isolation is eased up a little bit, because I know that sounds like it'll help. Enjoy your drives in the nature. Thanks again, Ryan. I really do appreciate it. And I'll connect with you very soon. Okay?
All right. Sounds good.
Take care, man.
As always, thanks so much for listening and all of your support. And special thanks to Ryan up in Maine. Thank you, Ryan. If you are a suicide attempt survivor and you'd like to talk, please reach out. hello@suicidenoted.com or on Facebook or Twitter @suicidenoted. And of course, you could help us out by letting folks know about the podcast, sharing it on social media, and if you listen on Apple, rating and reviewing. It really helps. Thanks so much for that. That is all for episode number 98. Stay strong. Do the best you can. I'll talk to you soon.